It is a 7-game Friday night around the association, and the countdown to crunch time is 90 minutes, where we show you the biggest moments of the night as they happen live. The pulse of the NBA is covered right here on Crunch Time, and we've got you up to speed on what's happening around the NBA. We've started with Giannis versus Luka, and Giannis gets it going first. Giannis has got 10 in the first quarter, and there's still 4:20 left. But Luka would have an answer. He's now 2 of 5 from the field. And in case you're wondering, Porzingis is 2 of 5 for 5 points. It's a 5-point lead for Milwaukee. We'll get you up to speed on what's happening there throughout the night. Boston finally back in action tonight, and they are looking good. Jaylen Brown, Now, is that Greg's son? I believe it is.
The better version?
Look at the 5-0. The cut and the dunk.
DA could never do that.
We've never seen a Greg Anthony dunk in the history of the
Not
world.
with 2 hands.
Boston leads 32-24. Cole Anthony's got 9. Knicks and Cavaliers. Cavaliers really shorthanded tonight, but they lead it by 3. No Jared Allen just yet for them, or Taurean Prince. But Andre Drummond has got 5. Countdown to crunch time continues. Welcome on into a Friday night around the association. The countdown to crunch time is here. This is Game Time Live, presented by State Farm. We've got Cole's dad with us for the next several hours, as well as Sam Mitchell, Morgan's dad.
That's a really nice sweater, by the way.
Thank you. I'm okay with that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Sam was going to wear it, but then he decided to give it to me instead. The countdown to crunch time is on. We'll take you up until 9:30. At that time, we will show you the biggest moments of the night as they're happening live, bouncing around from game to game to game. We were supposed to have 10 games tonight. We then got down to 8 with 2 games, Washington and Detroit, and Golden State and Phoenix getting postponed. We knew about those back on Wednesday. But just about an hour and a half ago, we learned of Memphis and Minnesota being postponed, taking us down to just 7 games tonight. And one of the reasons why tonight's game in Minnesota has been postponed is because a couple of players have contracted COVID-19, including Karl Anthony Towns, who you may recall lost his mother and 6 other family members to this deadly virus. Absolutely awful that he has suffered this. You check out what Karl Anthony Towns has tweeted out tonight. Prior to tonight's game, I received yet another awful call that I tested positive for COVID. I will immediately isolate and follow every protocol. I pray every day that this nightmare of a virus will subside, and I beg everyone to continue to take it seriously by taking all of the necessary precautions. Kat continued, we cannot stop the spread of this virus alone. It must be a group effort by all of us. It breaks my heart that my family, and particularly my father and sister, continue to suffer from the anxiety that comes along with this diagnosis, as we all know too well what the end result could be. To my niece and nephew, I promise you I will not end up in a box next to grandma, and I will beat this. Sobering from Karl Anthony Towns. And Coach Mitchell, you were the head coach in Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns, and you know him well. This has been a rough year for everyone, but particularly his family. He lost his mom and 6 other family members. This is unbelievable news.
Yeah, Jared, Karl is such a unique individual, such a good guy, and for him to, to contract this virus after losing 7 family members, including his mom, is just, it's heartbreaking, it's devastating, but it reminds us of what we're dealing with. As this virus is out of control, we have to stay safe. We have to take every precaution, and we have to protect not only ourselves, but our loved ones and our fellow citizens. And my heart goes out to Karl and his family. I know he's going to get through this. He's a strong young man. But Jared and Greg, at some point, you have to ask yourself, how much more can this young man take? Because it's just piling on. But I'm going to say something. I remember my grandmother used to tell me this. God don't put something on you that you can't handle. And I think Karl Anthony Towns can handle this.
And Sam, I think that's a great point. And, Karl Anthony Towns has always been one of my favorite players, in part because he's always been one of my favorite people. You know, he's a wonderful human being with great, infectious, positive energy, and he has incredible character. And I think that's one reason why he, more so than most, will be able to deal with all of the difficulty and the trauma and the adversity that he and his family have felt. But I also think he's showing through his words and his actions that he is truly a leader. And ultimately, I think he's going to beat this and come back better and stronger. But more importantly, I think he can be a voice for the voiceless and for so many who are struggling with this disease or this virus. And I'm just praying for the best for him and hoping he's back on the court soon.
So again, Minnesota and Memphis has been postponed to a yet to be determined later date. We're down to 7 games tonight. If we learn anything more from Minnesota or Karl Anthony Towns tonight, we certainly will pass that along to you. It's been a busy news day around the association. Give you some other headlines. You may have heard today Kyrie Irving has been fined by the league office $50,000 for violating the health and safety protocol based on that video that showed him what appeared to be his sister's birthday party in a large group of more than 15 people. He was not wearing a mask. It was first reported that Irving was expected to play on Saturday versus the Magic. However, in the last couple of hours, it has come out that due to health and safety protocol, Kyrie will not be eligible to play tomorrow. James Harden, however, is expected to make his Nets debut against the Magic tomorrow. Meanwhile, the 76ers take a blow here. They're on such a hot streak. They've been playing great basketball, but they won't have Joel Embiid for the next 2 due to right knee pain. And the Washington Wizards, who I told you has their game postponed tonight at Detroit, will also have their series against Cleveland on Sunday and Monday postponed, as 6 players have reportedly tested positive for COVID, and additional players, obviously you'd imagine, are also in isolation right now. So the Washington Wizards getting a whole week of basketball completely wiped out. We'll keep you up to speed on that. As far as the Nets go, James Harden and Steve Nash talking to the New York media for the first time today about this blockbuster trade that pairs Harden with Kyrie and KD, and what a lineup this could look like.
I mean, obviously, you got Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the team. And then surrounded by those guys, you have really good pieces in DeAndre, Jeff, shooters, and Joe, Landry. And, I mean, you just look at this entire roster, and it's built for any style of basketball you want. And then the coaching staff who, knows the game of basketball at a high level. You just add that all together, and it's like that's a legit chance right there. It was a no-brainer for me. I wasn't disrespectful to anyone. Those guys, I just got there, Houston. I've been there for a very long time. I've been through all the ups and downs, with that organization, and I wasn't disrespectful towards anyone. I just made a comment, that the team as a whole wasn't good enough to compete for a title. And, at the stage of my career, right where I am now, that's what I would love, and so I wasn't trying to be disrespectful to anybody, especially not to the organization.
We obviously got one of the premier players in the world. So it's always tough to say goodbye to guys that you develop a relationship with, you feel strongly about. But, going forward, we got very, very unique talent, incredible firepower. You could go down the line and talk about all the things he does with the basketball and brings to a team. So we're thrilled to have James and give our team a boost, but also obviously give us a lot more talent.
James, how would you describe your conditioning level now at this point in the season?
Great.
Yeah, James, me too. I mean, unbelievable. That's
Stop, Jared, stop.
Okay, so here's the question. When we come to basketball, and we may get a glimpse of at least 2/3 of that new big 3 tomorrow against Orlando. But Coach, listen, the way he left Houston is probably a conversation for another day. But the one thing we did see was how disengaged from basketball he was. And what that motive was doesn't matter at this point. Turning the page, can he just flip the switch, be in great basketball shape, and be able to change his mentality from what he had the last 3 weeks in Houston?
Absolutely. Jared, we saw James Harden after missing the first game of the season, game was canceled, and then missing the first regular season game, and then come back and score, 40-plus points? I mean, look, James Harden is a unique basketball player. We understand, look, you don't get traded by averaging 40, 15, and 9 and playing great. James Harden, look, it's unfortunate that he did what he did to force his way out of Houston, but at the end of the day, you're talking about a unique talent. You're talking about a guy with the ball in his hand is unguardable. And in pick and roll, he's the best player I've ever seen in 25 years in a pick and roll situation. With the basketball, he is lethal. Regardless of what happened in Houston, and James made one point that people need to understand. He was in Houston a long time before the current players got there. So he had relationships, and he had fallen out with some of the management people there. And so James Harden had a different perspective of the organization rather than John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, and some of the other players. I'm not condoning what he did. I don't like that. But at the end of the day, it's a players' league. He forced his way out. So what is Brooklyn going to do now? That's the question. How are they going to incorporate Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant when they couldn't get the guys that they have now in the current roster to play together and win games?
GA?
Well, first and foremost, listen, none of us like the approach that James Harden took to bring about his opportunity to leave Houston. But by the same token, I would say, what would you expect him to do? Because I guarantee you, had he gone to management and just said, look, this is not working, can you trade me? That's probably not going to bring about the outcome he wanted, firstly. Secondly, in terms of how he's going to fit in Brooklyn, his heart just wasn't into being there at that point. And again, we can talk about whether or not that's appropriate or acceptable, but we just saw this play out with Anthony Davis in New Orleans. And all the vitriol and the criticism that he took. And what he went about and did was play and go on with LeBron James, win a championship. And now that's not the narrative anymore. Now we're looking at Anthony Davis as the talent and the player that he is, and we're not focusing on what transpired to get him out of New Orleans. And I think a similar scenario could play out for James Harden with the Brooklyn Nets if they're able to make it work. You know, there are a lot of questions as to whether or not that roster still has to get figured out in terms of the complementary pieces, the ability of those three guys to be able to coexist, because whenever you move down the totem pole in terms of your ability to score it, you got to be able to compensate for that in other areas. And so how that looks moving forward is going to be interesting. And then the reality is the bigger issue, too, if you're talking about Brooklyn, is what the hell's going to happen with Kyrie Irving?
Well, let's go there. That's where we want to go right now.
And then we don't even know how good the Brooklyn Nets can be because we haven't seen these guys play together and coexist yet.
Well, GA, let's go down the Kyrie Irving, open up that Pandora's box here, right? These are three very talented players, and there's this, question out there of can they play together? Well, first, as you said, they've actually physically got to get on the court together, and we don't know when Kyrie is going to play, and if he does play, is there another issue that pops up where he takes a week or two off down the road? We don't know what's going on at this point. So where does Kyrie fit into all of this? And I hate to frame it this way because it doesn't necessarily have to be this way, but this is how it works. Does he become almost like the third option, which is weird to say because of how talented he is, GA, on the offensive end? Yeah,
and Jared, it's a great point, right? We saw a similar dynamic when LeBron went to Miami, because there was a scenario where you had three guys that had all been the best player on really good teams. In D. Wade's case, Finals MVP. Obviously, LeBron had been to the finals and taken a team there. Chris Bosh had taken a team to the postseason, was a dominant figure. But in order for them to get to where they had to go, there had to be major sacrifice. And Dwayne Wade was the first to say, hey, look, LeBron, you got to be the best player. And it took a year for them to figure that out. And that's a year in which they had a training camp and a summer together. This situation where they're on the fly in the midst of a pandemic, we don't know who the hell's playing, when they're playing, how they're playing. I mean, there's still a lot more questions than answers for this Brooklyn Nets team. Having said that, though, I'd rather be in their situation than not if I'm trying to compete at the highest level. Because in that Eastern Conference, we still have every bit as many questions about all the other contenders, right? Philadelphia, we see Embiid's going to be out the next couple games with knee concerns. Boston, we've seen they've had all kinds of issues in the midst of this pandemic. Miami doesn't seem to be at the same level that we saw in the bubble a year ago. So there are a lot of uncertainties in that Eastern Conference that I think benefits the Brooklyn Nets if and when, and that's a big if, they get everybody on board, buying in. And listen, the biggest concern, the biggest pressure, the most pressure is going to be on Steve Nash, because he's got to be the guy that figures it out with these personalities who all feel like they're the best player. Like in that locker room, Kyrie Irving doesn't think he's the third best player. James Harden doesn't think he's third. Neither does Kevin Durant. And they've all got a legitimate argument to their case of being the best player. But ultimately, sacrifice is going to have to be made. And the coach is going to have to be, and that coaching staff, the ones that figure out a way to get everybody to buy in. Because if they don't buy in, it ain't going to work, no matter how much talent you have.
Yeah, GA, to your point, man, look, you made two very good points, man. First of all, I'd rather be in Brooklyn's situation having too much talent, trying to figure out what to do with all this talent, than some of these other teams that don't have enough talent. I remember those nights when you turn to look down your bench and you're looking for a sub and you're saying, who am I going to put in that can change the game? Well, Brooklyn's not going to have that problem. Steve Nash is going to have to figure out how to get these guys to work. Because, GA, you said it. Look, Kyrie Irving is a point guard. But James Harden, to me, is an elite point guard. James Harden, you saw James Harden. He's played with Chris Paul. He's played with Russ. He's played with John Wall. When he doesn't have the ball in his hand, he doesn't know what to do with himself. And at this stage of his career, James Harden is not going to reinvent himself. To me, the three of those guys with Steve Nash are going to have to sit down in the room. And to your point, Greg, like LeBron, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade, they're going to have to figure out who is the dominant player with the ball, and they're going to have to make sacrifices and play accordingly. And to me, you got to give the ball to James Harden because he's a willing passer, he's a great passer, and when he has the ball in pick and roll, he is lethal. So they're going to have to come to a meeting of the minds, and everybody's going to have to figure out, you may not lead the league in scoring. You're going to have to play D, you're going to have to share the ball, but they got to figure out how those three guys are going to interact and play together. And Steve Nash got to figure out how to balance his roster out and play with those three guys, mix and match those guys with the rest of that roster.
I'll tell you the guy who might have to reinvent himself the most is DeAndre Jordan. Jared Allen was playing big minutes, was playing great minutes, rim protector. DeAndre Jordan was not looking very good the first
Not reinvent himself, start playing better.
Right.
Because James Harden talks about it.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant talks about it. He is the guy now because Jared Allen is gone.
All right, so we'll talk more about the Nets a little later on. They're off tonight. Tomorrow they play Orlando again. Harden's supposed to play. At the top of the show, we showed you the first three games that are underway. Got another one that's underway. It is Sam Mitchell's all-time favorite player in the history of basketball. Coming off of 45, where he dropped 10 threes here, Sam. He's right on the board early on.
Stop hating, Jared. Stop hating. Look, man, we're looking at a budding all-star before our eyes.
All right, let's get you up to speed on the rest of the night in the NBA. That tips off in a little bit. Jazz back at home. They won 3 straight. Hawks back in action after having Wednesday's game postponed. Atlanta's lost 4 in a row. Tonight they could get their number 1 pick on the court for the first time. Onyeka Okongwu, GA, is expected to play for the first time about 15 minutes tonight.
And that's, I think, going to be important to kind of get him integrated back into the rotation. And, you know, guys, we've talked about this ad nauseum. With all that's going on and all the uncertainty and the postponement of games and guys in and out of the lineup, you know, generally you say, oh, you know, we'll have a good sense of where we are as a league in about 20 games. I don't think that's the case this year. I think it's going to literally be about 30, 35 games before we have a real sense of which teams are good and which teams are in rebuild mode. And I think because of that, these games are important because you do want to build continuity and build rhythm. But it's going to take some time to figure it all out for these teams, and a tremendous challenge. And Sam can attest to this as a head coach from a coaching standpoint. Less practice time, less time putting in your systems, building your culture than you ordinarily would have, man, creating a lot of challenges moving forward.
All right, GA, we'll move along here to our next game that starts at 10 o'clock Eastern tonight. Kings at home, where they have lost their last 14 consecutive games to the Clippers. Clippers have won 14 straight, not necessarily just in that building, but in the state, in the city of Sacramento. The 8-4 Clippers might be shorthanded tonight. Sam, both Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams are questionable with injuries.
Yeah, it's a tough role, and it's something we got to deal with. But you look at this Clipper team with Kawhi and the rest of these guys, look, they are talented. They're starting to hit their stride a little bit. The thing they got to do, they got to pick up their defense. That's the thing that's disappointing to me. But this is a huge game for Sacramento because Sacramento started off pretty decent. They've been sliding lately. They need to pick up their play, and the Clippers need to continue to start building on that continuity between this team right now.
Last game of the night, Zion returns after a one-game absence. Pels trying to end a 3-game losing streak. They need a win desperately. Won't be easy. Anthony Davis and the Lakers, GA, have won 4 in a row.
Yeah, they're starting to create a little bit of separation from the rest of the league in that Western Conference with their consistency and the depth overall. I mean, they've got so many guys playing at a high level, and that's what happens after you win a championship. Everybody's confidence elevates. And if you're the Pelicans, I mean, listen, Ingram and Williamson, I'm in love with. The way that they played in the backcourt, the lack of shooting from Bledsoe and Ball, that's a big concern, big picture for this team. And how they address that, how they improve in those areas is going to be critical to their success.
All right, GA, that's what we have on tap later on tonight. Here's what we have underway already. New York and Cleveland. Here's another rookie, Isaac Okoro. He's got 2. Andre Drummond's got 12 and 10 already in the first half. Cleveland trails New York. Kristaps Porzingis' second game back, pulling up in transition from 3, and he buries it. KP's got 5, but Milwaukee's up 37-28. Let's go to Orlando in Chicago. I'm sorry, in Boston, not Chicago. Aaron Gordon gets that one to go down, but Boston leads at 51-40.
You just want to talk about Chicago because Zach. That's all, Jared. Zach is on your mind.
Well, he's trailing right now by 2. All right, coming up next, Charles Barkley joins the program, and he gives his guarantees, talking about what to expect for the Nets. Get ready to lay down some money on the other one that he picked, not the one he picked.